Good evening. Today is November 16, 2020, and this is the 27th episode of New Paradigms. I'm your host, Sargis Sangari. My guest today is a good friend of mine, David Shostokis. David earned his Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Baylor University in 1975 and his Juris Doctor from the John Marshall Law School, cum laude, in June of 1987. From 86 to 87, he served on the John Marshall Law Review. He studied law at Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland. He is the author of Constitutional Soundbites, which has 150 questions and answers about America's founding documents, and creating the Declaration of Independence, which follows Thomas Jefferson and John Adams in weeks before July 4, 1776. Davis has worked with Dr. Bretta Arias, past president of the Illinois Latino Council, on higher education to provide accurate Spanish translations of information regarding America's founding and first principles as embodied in the Declaration of Independence, Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, and the only book in Spanish to explain America's founding documents. More importantly, David is currently working on issues and topics related to this year's election lawsuits. David, I know you're on the road and you're in Philly. It's good to have you here on New Paradigms.
Thank you so much for having me, Sargis. It's really great to be able to talk about some of the things we've been doing here the last 3 weeks actually, and spread across Pennsylvania. There's a team of lawyers that are spread across Pennsylvania, investigating the problems and issues that arose in terms of this election. I know I was actually here about 10 days in advance of the elections to do some things regarding setting up people to observe the counting and what they call the pre-canvass period. And the pre-canvass situation is, of course, they had mail-in ballots starting to come in the 29th of September in Pennsylvania, but they could not open them pursuant to Pennsylvania law until election day. It's morning. And so one of the first projects that I was involved in was putting together a team to monitor that pre-canvass period of the elections. And so that was in Allegheny County in Pittsburgh, where I was. There was people in Philadelphia and Montgomery counties and counties all over the state. There were 67 individual counties. And so what we had was actually 29 lawyers and 31 volunteers scheduled to go in 4-hour increments from 7 in the morning to 11 in the morning, 11 in the morning till 3, 3 to 7, and then repeating over again, so that we would have constant observation of the process of opening the ballots. Or actually, originally, the first step in the process was to substantiate the ballot, that is, to see to it that the voter had put in their name, address, dated it properly, and signed it. And then subsequent to that, then the mail-in portion of the ballot was to be opened, and the mail-in portion of the ballot was to contain a secrecy envelope, and inside the secrecy envelope was the actual ballot that somebody had voted for, not just for the president, but for all kinds of other offices, local offices, for members of Congress, etc. So we put the team together, and it took about a week to put together 60 people and schedule them for that period of time. And then, I've done this in Florida, I've done it in Illinois. Anytime you do this, then you have the opportunity to literally go watch and look over the shoulder of the election workers and see to it that the ballots are followed, opened properly, that the certifications, when they compare the records in the books to the mail, to see to it that all that's accurate. And that's a step that has to be taken prior to opening the mail-in envelope in the first place. So we get there at 7 o'clock, all prepared, people trained to do that, what to look for, what kind of things the Pennsylvania law provides, and we were herded into what amounts to a corral. that was about 25 feet long and about 25 feet wide, and we were in a warehouse that was altogether probably about 40,000 square feet. The section where the folks were actually actually taking the ballots, taking the secrecy ballots out of the mail-in envelopes was probably 25,000 square feet. There might have been 75, 80 people that were actually working on this. And the closest one to any of the people that were supposed to be the observers was probably 25 feet away. And the next one, and the furthest in that huge warehouse facility, was probably about 150 feet away, probably, half a football field. Half a football field away, if you can imagine that. And we're all behind fences that came up to my waist, probably about 3.5 foot high, and you could not leave the fenced-in area. In that room, there's another room where the machines were actually running, doing some other ballot tabulating, but where the actual workers were, you could not leave that corralled-in area. And of course, this was clearly set up on purpose. I'm sure people have seen the election authorities going out and having their press conferences and saying, everybody could observe. There was an equal number of Republicans and an equal number of Democrats, and we were all equally far away. In which case, for all practical purposes, they may as well have been opening the ballots in the bathroom in my hotel room here. It would not have. I would not have had a better view of that, and the fact that we had organized 60 people, trained them what to look for, trained them what Pennsylvania law mattered not. Over the course of the next 2 days, they opened and processed about almost 330,000 ballots in Allegheny County, essentially in the dead of night. They may as well have been doing it on the dock in the dark, and there was no opportunity to have any meaningful observation. The state law says says an opportunity to observe and to be in the room where the pre-canvass period is taking place, and they tried to play it like we were actually had some sort of meaningful observation, and we clearly did not. And that was just the one corner. That was in Pittsburgh in Allegheny County, and of course most of the stuff that came on the news covered Philadelphia, over at the other end of the state. And the same thing was going on there. And not only was going on there, they were actually putting up barricades and barriers that kept people further away. They got a court order in Philadelphia. The Trump campaign team got a court order in Philadelphia that allowed people to be within 6 feet, keeping with the social situations regarding COVID. And so the election authorities in Philadelphia set up a table with about 3 of the workers that was in one location, and then they took the rest and they allowed people to, for a short period of time, to get within 6 feet of those workers, and then they moved the balance of the workers 25, 50 feet away. And so, for all practical purposes, again, in Philadelphia and in Pittsburgh, and in several other what amounted to Democratic machine counties in the state of Pennsylvania, they opened approximately, from what I understand, the last count in the lawsuit that was filed a week ago today in the Middle District of Pennsylvania was 685,000 ballots that were literally opened with absolutely no oversight to begin with at all. And that's just the observation situation. It was actually even worse than that, because where they were doing we don't even have any idea where they were actually doing the comparison of the names, the locations, and the signatures and the dating, because they came into the room where we were at already sliced open by a machine that were sliced open at the top. So for all we know, before they ever came in the room, the secrecy envelopes that were in there could have been placed there by anybody, or they could have been placed as Mr. Giuliani said in one press conference, they could have been placed in there on Mars, for all we know, or they could, it just didn't matter. There was about 680,000 ballots across the state of Pennsylvania that were opened. We have no idea where they came from, who they are, who they belong to, if they're actual voters. And that's part and parcel of the lawsuit that they're going to have a hearing on in Philadelphia tomorrow. I spent, as I said, I spent about 3 weeks in the Pittsburgh area, both in Allegheny and Westmoreland counties. In Westmoreland County, I was working on what they call provisional ballots. And provisional ballots were provided to people that showed up to vote, that for some reason or other, there was actually about seven categories of folks that were given provisional ballots. The most prevalent was, though, is that they were sent a mail-in ballot, and the mail-in ballot was either not voted or voted, and the voter said they didn't voted. This is another element of the fraudulent activities that have taken place here in Pennsylvania. The folks they were showing up at the polling place to vote, and the poll worker looks at the books and looks at the records and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, you can't vote. You already did." And the voter says, "No, I didn't. I didn't vote. I never requested a mail-in ballot. I didn't ask for one. I never got one. I haven't voted." And yet the worker says, "Well, no, you have in fact voted." And what those people wound up doing was actually voting a provisional ballot. At the moment, those ballots where people indicate that they had never voted, but had voted, but the records show that they did. Those ballots at the moment are still segregated and haven't been opened, as they were being segregated as part of the provisional ballot process. But when the first folks at the board hearing, the provisional ballots come, and actually in Westmoreland County, we had very good transparency and access to view the provisional ballots, and then we had an opportunity to challenge rejections. There were people that were having their provisional ballots rejected because the voter information that the state of Pennsylvania said that these people were inactive. And of course, that has to do with some aspects of the National Voter Registration Act, where if they haven't voted in two federal election cycles, that they're declared inactive, and the state at this point is supposed to reach out and see if they still live in the same place, if they're still alive, or any number of other things. They're supposed to reach out to them, and if they don't reach out, and then the ballot gets cast. The original review of the provisional ballots was telling people they were saying that they were going to reject those ballots, and I actually represented folks in the electoral board hearing after this initial rejection, because I challenged the rejection. And when we challenged the rejection, I discussed with the board the fact that what it amounted to is that the state of Pennsylvania hadn't followed its obligations under the National Voter Registration Act, and there's no good reason to disenfranchise the voter who showed up to vote because Pennsylvania hadn't fulfilled its obligations under the National Voter Registration Act. And we actually had 30 ballots that were going to be rejected now counted. So so the process is not just seeing to it that they don't count illegal ballots. The process also includes making sure legal ballots are counted. It's a two-way street, and there's the team that I've been involved with over the last 3 weeks. There's been like 200 lawyers that have been doing this across the state of Pennsylvania, and I might mention the vast bulk of them are volunteers. They're doing this because they think it's right. They're doing it because it's right for the country to, and so they're volunteering of their time and their energy and their knowledge and their skill to protect the integrity of the election. It's very tiresome to see in fact, the last few days I just stopped watching the news because the news that they were reporting on Pennsylvania is so unrelated to the things that are happening on the ground. And there are people, like Ambassador Bolton and other people telling the president, well, it's all done, et cetera, et cetera. People that have never been on the ground, never been in provisional ballot challenge hearing. I've never been part of what's going on. Going, it's over, and they don't really know. At the last count I knew, from what I heard, the president was behind by about 40,000 votes based on what they'd counted today. Well, there's a couple of days ago there was still 94,000 provisional ballots that had not been counted or processed. Okay, so there's more ballots outstanding just in that one category of provisional ballots. There's another category of ballots regarding voters that did not date their ballots. There's another category of ballots that is under litigation that came in after Election Day, and that the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania said to count, even though the legislature of Pennsylvania said not to count them. And that's a significant number of ballots. Those ballots are segregated. There's 94,000 in the one class. I have no idea, because that's the class I've been dealing with myself personally. Because everybody, there's a few people that have the 30,000-foot view of what's going on, but most of us that are on the ground doing things are laser focused on one element of what's going on. But and to that extent, that one part of the provisional ballot thing is just terrible, because what happened, what is the only reasonable thing that happened is that somebody else voted for the voter. They either stole the ballot out of their mailbox, or some worker never delivered it, and they voted the ballot for a voter, and then the voter went to show up and they voted the provisional ballot. But what will happen without challenge is that the vote that was fraudulently cast for that voter, that was stolen from that voter, will count, and the vote that the voter actually cast will not. And so it's like a double whammy, because the law was written at a time when there was 2-3% of the people might have had an absentee ballot, and then certain percentage of those folks might have forgotten that they put it in the mail. They might have forgotten. So the presumption is that the first ballot cast is the good one. But when you have this going on the massive scale that's been going on, then you have the circumstance where there's massive number of people show up saying, "No, I did not cast a mail-in ballot," and yet the records reflect that they did. And how many people would go to the polls and try and vote if they had already voted? Not many, So this it's a mess, Sargis. It's a huge mess.
David, I know that for most of our listeners, so they understand, is that first of all, you got involved volunteer, so you weren't getting paid for this. And I know me and you had a discussion going back almost couple of months before the election, and I did say that we were probably going to run into this mess even in Illinois. And I know that we're seeing some of those stories come out in Illinois itself as to what happened with the vote counts and how the numbers just don't match.
Yeah, you were among the people that predicted that this kind of chaos was going to ensue with these elections, and we were talking before we came on about situation with your election and the numbers involved in your election. We were just talking about that, and it sounded to me like there was an impossible number of people who voted in your district. Is that what was that total number again?
Yeah, I mean, one thing so people know too, a day after the election, I reached out to the incumbent that I was running against, and we spoke via cell phone together, but we saw numbers coming in afterwards that didn't make sense. We had some reporting that came in almost a week after. As to, you mentioned how the ballots were getting cut, we got the information that the machine that they had wasn't just receiving ballots, it was cutting through the ballots. So once it cut through the ballots, not just the envelope, those ballots were being rehand done because they couldn't feed them through the machine by, in this case, a Democratic precinct leader who was filling them out in a room nobody was watching. because they were trying to make sure that those votes that the machine cut were read. Now, how many of those are out there? That's still a number that's being looked at. And for us, what didn't make sense on our numbers, and just to give an update for my folks, I'm currently at 104,818 votes cast for me in this election. 22,997 came out of Chicago, which is 18.72% of the vote, and 82,721 came out of the suburbs, which is heavily Republican. So we got that's 34.32%. And in some of the precincts that we had, individuals like a young man, Ante Beckman, not a retired, but a police officer who actually fought against leukemia, who was running. His numbers have almost 94% of the voters voting in that particular precinct. We're not talking about 94% in, we're talking about 94% of voters voting, which is an incredible number. If you look at it, overall numbers for my district is 359,075, and we're trying to see if that even matches the number of registered voters specifically in the 9th congressional district, because it's way beyond. So if you think about it, if I'm running against an incumbent and my numbers are increasing, I'm digging into her numbers at a level that you had never dug into those numbers before. We're supposed to not have both of our numbers go up. One of us is supposed to lose numbers because you're digging into the pool of voters that you're fighting against. So with that said, these are some of the issues that are being looked at, and for our voters so they understand. Cindy Powell, who's well known as being a lawyer out there working on the electronic issues that we were dealing with for the election, to include the Dominion system, which in this case is software. The Cook County has gone ahead and signed a 10-year contract. So as most people are saying, you no longer are just running against a machine, you're literally running against a machine in this case that you'll never know, could flip the votes however it wants. So that's what she's looking at. You're literally looking at the other aspects, like we talked about the possible cut ballots, individuals who may have submitted ballots that you don't even know if they voted themselves or not. You don't know where these numbers of ballots that were sent out in total mass are coming in, and not having observers from both sides to be able to look at them. So you're looking at the other portion of what this whole discussion is. And I want people to know that this is not in this case, the Trump campaign fighting Biden in the legal process. This is literally the Trump campaign fighting against the local governments across the board of all 50 states where it has these issues is dealing with.
I think that's really, really important to note. Everybody talks about these days there comes up in the subject Bush versus Gore. It's kind of interesting, at least in every lawsuit I've seen and the things that I've been consulting on, there is no Trump versus Biden. It is, as you mentioned, Trump versus all the corrupt local officials who are in charge of voting, and because Joe Biden is not doing anything to defend his victory, as Al Gore was doing to appropriately defend his position back in 2000, and George Bush was defending his position back in 2000. Joe Biden takes no position. He's in his basement. I was here, like I said, a week before, and during the course of that week, the president came to visit Butler County, and he did a fly-in at Butler County Airport in Pennsylvania, western Pennsylvania. The local media the next day reported that there were 54,000 people came to see the president at the Butler County Airport that night. And I can tell you it was a chilly night, and the closest parking was about 2 miles away. It's very, very difficult to believe that a guy that on the other end of the state could get 12 cars beeping their horns was going to beat a guy that had 54,000 people show up on a cold night and walk 2.5 miles from where the parking was located to the airport facility. So there's a whole lot of anomalies and irregularities, and you're right. There is a team in Washington that's overseeing the efforts of many of the volunteers, and their work and actually filing the lawsuits. Part of that, one element of the team, as you mentioned, is Sidney Powell, who did yeoman's work regarding General Flynn and that fiasco, and is now heading up the team that is investigating the computer election fraud. And I think that's the other thing that's important to note. People, go around talking about voter. This is not voter fraud. This is election fraud. This is on such a massive scale to say that it's an election. It's a fraudulent election. It's not a fraudulent vote here and there. It's a fraudulent election. These activities are so humongous. You just mentioned a 94% voter turnout in your district. 20%
and the sub-districts within the district.
Yeah, 20% of the American people move every year. You could not, and the states are not keeping up with the voter registration. I'm actually counsel for the Illinois Conservative Union on a suit suing the Illinois State Board of Elections for its failure to maintain clean voter rolls, and which they have an obligation to do under federal law. This is a really, really terrible situation. And if you would think that there was a guy that wanted to be president of all the people, the thing for Mr. Biden to do at this juncture is say, we want to make sure everything's right. We're going to join and send our teams in and help. He has no teams. They're just, if he's got a team, it's consulting and going out to have a cocktail with the local vote counter. As far as I know, there's no legal team.
We know that. Look, I think one of the problems was that kind of led to all this. As you and me spoke, I saw this coming a couple of months before the 3 November. Yes. We talked, and I said, David, I truly need us to maybe focus how we can have our support here. One problem is that a lot of people don't understand under the American jurisprudence, it's very difficult to prove fraud. Even each of the issues that come up, you literally have to go through a process of documenting these things. As an example for me, just on election day, the information that was provided to the Republican Illinois GOP as to where the voting polls are going to be were completely different than the ones given to the Democrats. So what happened was the Republicans, we ended up showing up to voting locations that were not closed. They had been moved. So in that process, information they have put out for people to go and vote on election day, if you have an individual 2-3 who don't show up there and who don't, or show up and see something's closed, they may not even vote anymore. So trying to move your teams from location to location to include individuals who have credentials, and on the piece of paper you're given for credentials, you have to put the address of the location you're going to. So you have to redo those documents to give them back to poll watchers to be able to go to the new location to walk through. Even in my case, my children go to Niles West here in Skokie area. And when I had put them there because I wanted to help their dad in order to be able to hand out basically walk cards for individuals who were going in to vote. Individual judge had come out and said, well, you cannot be here. This school property, you have to go across the road, which is almost 300 meters away from the location that they were at. And they can't challenge him because you need a guy like me who goes and gets involved, says, I'm the individual who's actually running here. You have to have a line marcation on the ground that says from the entrance of the voting facility to the outside is where they can still stand. In that process, if I'm on a debate or fight that issue, even when my kids are involved and I'm involved as a person running for office, and they know that, you still have to get individuals come in to take affidavits. You have to have those recorded. You have to get a follow-on with the lawyers getting involved. And the fact is you're dealing with so many different precincts, 300 plus precincts, and all these voting locations. It's just you don't have the resourcing to do it. So people said that there's no hard evidence of something being there. Well, here's one case that it would take me 3 hours on election day just to be able to get those documents done in order to have one affidavit so I can have that, go through the process of the pile that the lawyers have to look at. Individuals walking in with their shirt of the opposition talk about, the fact that they were just going to use the bathroom, not there to influence the voters that were going in. In the Illinois case, with 1% of the vote being in, Durbin declared himself a victor while he was behind in votes. If you take a look at the two individuals who ran, one was a Republican, Mark Curran, and then you're looking at an independent, Willie Wilson. Willie Wilson lost votes after the primary in the areas where, when he was running for mayor, he got majority of the votes in the districts, which was very majority black districts that voted for him. So when you're looking at these type of pings that say, well, why is he declaring himself but being behind with 1% of the vote showing up, and how is it possible that he's getting more votes from the black community instead of a member of the black community who has all these investments in those particular districts in support of the black community? Doesn't make sense. In my case, I even had individuals who reported, said, well, how come is it that the person you're running against is not even doing anything when it comes to individuals being out there actually trying to pass on her brochures and talk about we need to give 2 more years for the current congresswoman, and it was non-existent. And sometimes people say maybe they already knew something was in the system that we were not aware of, even during the primaries, where you had majority of Republicans being at various different polling stations, and every time you would go there, in the past, you would see individuals from the opposition having their people to try to at least push their so-called incumbent or individual running to be part of the process, and you just didn't see the numbers. And the fact that in the heavy Republican areas, the numbers are lower for the individuals who are running as Republicans than it is, but the numbers are coming in on those absentee ballots for Democratic incumbent, just really make you kind of have to go through the process of saying, is there something we missed here? Now, David, with that said, I know where we are. I know where we're at. You're a constitutional author and lawyer. There's still a system. There's a process and a timeline. Come January 20th, the current POTUS is not going to be the POTUS anymore. That date is set in stone. So what happens between now and then? Is it any way a possibility that there's going to be any decisions made either at the federal level or even at the Supreme Court level when it comes to these challenges that are out there currently?
There's a number of scenarios, Sargis, that can possibly take place. What people don't know and should remember is that ultimately the Constitution gives the authority to appoint the electors that vote for the President of the United States to the state legislature. The system where the electors are chosen via the popular vote is a system that's been created by the state legislatures for this purpose. But at the moment, it's not within the realm of possibility. There's a December 6th date that is what they call a safe harbor date, that if the state certifies its electors by that date, then they will be guaranteed that their electors will participate. If they do not, they're in danger of actually losing their electors. And there is some possibility that this thing is going to be so messed up and so tied up in litigation that the states, certain states, probably 5 or 6 of them, I would say Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, may very well still not be certified by that date. And if that were to come to pass, the state legislatures actually themselves can get together and determine who's going to represent them. And it's interesting situation because 5 of those 6 states that I just mentioned, all of them except Nevada, have Republican legislatures. And the Republican legislatures can just go, this is crazy. We don't know what happened. We can't tell what happened between the Dominion voting machines and the consequences of that, between the circumstances and the inability to guarantee the security of the, in Pennsylvania, 680,000 mail-in ballots that were opened without any oversight. State legislature can wake up one day, the speakers can, the House can get together with the people in the legislatures and just take a vote, and say we're going to send our electors to the Electoral College, and they're going to be for President Trump. That is within the constitutional realm of possibilities. Politically, where they decide to do that, that's a separate question and apart. But 5 of the 6 states that are open at the moment can decide to do that. And another interesting aspect of that is the Constitution says that the electors shall be chosen as defined by the legislatures of the states. That is, the governor is cut out of the process. It does not involve the governor, it only involves the legislature. So like here or in Michigan, where the legislature is Republican but the governor is Democrat, the governor has no say-so in the outcome. So there's a variety of possible scenarios. It's also possible that because of that situation, maybe certain states will not send their electors. In which case, it's possible that neither Mr. Biden nor Mr. Trump will wind up with 270. And if that were the case, then because it's a majority of those eligible to be electors, not necessarily not the electors that are not the votes that are cast, but a majority of the electors that are eligible, and that requires 270. It's half of 535 plus 1 to come to 270. And so in that scenario, actually the House of Representatives gets to select the president, and the House of Representatives gets to select the president by 1 vote for each state. And at the moment, at last count, there are 27 state delegations in the House of Representatives that are controlled by Republicans as well. So there's a variety of scenarios whereby Mr. Biden does not become president of the United States. And it's just really a shame and disturbing that the national media, even the local media, just all the generally established media one way or another goes around saying president-elect when not 1 vote has been certified by 1 state anywhere in the country at this juncture. There is no media confirmation clause in the Constitution. The media doesn't get to say who the president is. There are rules and processes. And then the same goes for your election. It's not technically over until the votes are certified. So it's just it's a shame that these people don't take a step back and give Americans a breathing room. They're trying to paint everybody into a corner and create a circumstance where it's supposedly a foregone conclusion, and it's not a foregone conclusion between the fraud, between the circumstances in Georgia where they're literally doing a hand recount, and the hand recount will overcome some of the issues that we were talking about regarding the computer issues, because people will actually look at the ballots and count them by hand. So that you don't have you're not dependent upon computers. So there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things that can happen, and that's sort of when they say football coach says when you throw a pass, 3 things can happen. 2 of them are bad, but in this situation, 3 things can happen, and 2 of them are good. So we'll see how it plays out.
Well, David, unfortunately we got here because politicians, again, just wanted to retain their position and, for their own party rather than looking overall at what is beneficial to America. And this is a problem. This is what, we fought against, I fought against on the term limit issues. Individuals just are in it for money. A lot of people think that people are out there, and now you've said this because I'm a survey country. No, a lot of them are in it because of business. And until you ran a race, you'll realize that majority of the individuals that are out there are benefiting from this political process in dollar and cents, to include the individuals who are sitting in their positions. And it's unfortunate that money has been such a driver that it has forgotten about the importance of the flag behind me, the United States, our Constitution, Declaration of Independence that you have so well written about, and the actual philosophy on which our nation was built. And hopefully we'll have you back again, David. Hopefully this nation will work together to finally, at least through the legal process, to get to a point where we're able to purge ourselves from the mess that we caused ourselves this election, and hopefully to be able to have an opportunity in the future for people to run. I can tell you right now, there's a lot of individuals who are saying, why should I even run in Illinois if all that's going to happen is that I'm going to run? And we used to say you're running against a machine that uses dirty politics to keep individuals in power that are not capable. Now, if you're going to be running against an actual machine that can flip numbers on you, then what's the use of running? But that said, David, I'll give you last word, and if people want to get a hold of you or read a little bit more about what you've written, where can they go? And I'll give you the closeout, and we'll bring you back again.
Certainly. Thank you so much, Sargis. I will tell you, as you mentioned upon this, and we've talked about this, that there's, for people, unlike yourself, for politicians, unlike the president, government is not service. It's a family business. It's a business that they hand down from child to child and do it to make money. It's got nothing to do with service to the people. And this is very, very sad. And that's why you need term limits. That's why there shouldn't be any. I have no idea why an elected official should get a pension whatsoever. It makes no sense. But you should get that because you get a pension in private industry because you've served the business, contributed for a long time. But a pension is just contrary to the idea of public service. With that in mind, I think people do need to remember that there are folks that do want to do good for the country, like yourself, like our military folks, like the people that have joined me that are doing this as volunteer because we think it's right. You know, I think it's important to remember at this point, it is not about President Trump. It is not about the president. It is about trying to do what we can to purge the system and make sure every vote counts and every vote legally counts. And so we're gonna continue to work on that here, and we're not gonna give up on that. It's important that folks don't, and so they can if they want to know more. Yeah, there's about 200 articles on my website about the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. It's shestokas.com, SHESTOKAS. You can follow me on Twitter at Shestokas, SHESTOKAS. And we're going to keep working here in Pennsylvania. I'm going to keep trying to make what contributions I can make to the what's going on here in the state of Pennsylvania. Just as I know there's other people across the country that'll be doing that. And you're right, we got to clean up the computers too. Now you got a double whammy. So thank you so much, Sargis, for letting me be part of New Paradigms and speaking with your audience. Thank you for your service, both on the battlefield, both on the actual battlefield and in the political battlefield.
I much appreciate it, David, and you're doing yeoman's work yourself too, and the fact that you did it out of your own pocket, out of your own dime, goes to speak a lot volumes as to why it's important for individuals to understand the effects it's going to have on our country in the long term. Maybe short term, somebody wins and gets in because they wanted their political leader, party to win, but in the long term, we got to make sure if there's any damages or chinks in the armor that have occurred from this election, reverse those. And if you have to do it through the legal process, so be it. And with that said, David, we'll have you back again. Keep doing what you're doing, and we'll give another update next week as to where we are. And I hope to see everybody back on New Paradigms again. God bless and keep you safe. And please pray for the United States and pray for our nation, because we're going through heavy times in uncharted waters, and we need all the prayers possible. God bless you all.